In the vast expanse of the Galactic Federation's most prestigious academy, where the elite offspring of 1,000 civilized worlds gathered to learn diplomacy and governance, death was supposed to be nothing more than a theoretical concept discussed in philosophy classes. The Zephyrian nobles with their crystalline skin had never seen violence. The Altarian delegates, floating in their protective biosuits, knew conflict only through historical texts. Even the warrior caste Drakmari had been pacified for generations, their ancestral aggression bred out through careful genetic modification. But today, as Professor Veltar began his lecture on peaceful resolution of interspecies conflicts, none of them knew that genuine primal death had just walked through their classroom door. Not the sanitized clinical death of their medical texts, but the raw, brutal kind that came from a world where survival wasn't guaranteed by technology and civilization, but earned through blood, sweat, and an unbreakable will to live. The target, Ambassador Kethmore's daughter, sat unaware in the third row, her four eyes focused on her holographic notes. In 30 seconds, she would be dead, sparking the war that would consume 3 star systems. But the assassin had made one critical error in their intelligence gathering. They had assumed the new exchange student from the recently discovered world called Earth would react like every other civilized species when faced with lethal violence. Freeze in terror, call for help. Or for help, they had never encountered a human before. And humans, as the galaxy was about to learn, came from a world that didn't just teach survival. It demanded it. Marcus Chen had been on Centauri Prime for exactly 47 days, and he was already tired of being treated like a curiosity. The other students at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy would stop their conversations when he walked by, their various sensory organs tracking his movement with barely concealed fascination. Some whispered about his primitive homeworld, others about the strange dual-pupil structure of his eyes, and a few brave souls had even asked to touch his skin to confirm it wasn't some kind of synthetic covering. He'd grown used to the stares, the questions, and the general assumption that Earth humans were somehow less evolved than the rest of galactic civilization. After all, his planet had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, making them the newest members of the Galactic Federation by several millennia. Most of these students came from worlds that had been spacefaring longer than humanity had existed. The lecture hall was typical of Centauri architecture, massive, crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being built. The walls were transparent aluminum, offering a breathtaking view of the triple sunset that painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. 200 students from across the galaxy sat in hovering seats that adjusted automatically to each species' physiology. Marcus had requested a simple chair, finding the hovering technology made him motion sick. Professor Veltar, a tall Zephyrian with skin like living diamond, was in the middle of explaining the finer points of the Treaty of Andromeda when the classroom door opened. Marcus looked up from his notes, a habit ingrained from years of Earth schools where latecomers were either troublemakers or brought important messages. The figure that entered was humanoid but wrong in ways that Marcus's brain cataloged instantly. The proportions were slightly off, arms too long, torso too narrow. The face was hidden beneath a deep hood, but Marcus caught a glimpse of pale, almost translucent skin and eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal predator's. Most unsettling was the way the figure moved, with a fluid grace that spoke of trained muscle memory and lethal purpose. Around him, none of the other students seemed to notice anything amiss. The Altarians in their environmental suits continued floating peacefully, their tentacles making delicate gestures as they took notes. The Drakmari, despite their warrior heritage, barely glanced up from their holographic displays. Even the professor continued his lecture without pause. But Marcus had grown up in Detroit, in the ruins of the old American Rust Belt, where situational awareness wasn't a skill, it was survival. His father had been a Marine, his mother a Detroit police officer. Before humanity had reached the stars, they'd had to master the art of staying alive on a world that was actively trying to kill them. The hooded figure had entered during a transition between topics when attention naturally shifted. They moved with purpose toward the third row, where Zara Kethmore sat. The Rigelian girl was one of the few students who'd actually befriended Marcus, her curiosity about Earth culture leading to many late-night conversations about music, food, and the strange human concept of fiction. Where on Earth he might have carried a knife or multi-tool. Here, of course, weapons were unthinkable. The Academy existed in a state of perpetual peace, protected by the Federation's most advanced security systems. Nothing dangerous could possibly get through. That was when Marcus saw the blade. It was a thin, curved thing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hooded figure drew it with practiced ease, holding it low and close to their body as they approached Zara's row. The movement was so smooth, so natural, that it barely registered as threatening to a universe where violence was theoretical. But Marcus had seen that particular grip before. His Marine father had shown him pictures from the old wars before humanity had joined the Federation. It was the grip of someone who'd killed before, someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply and where to strike for maximum effect. Time seemed to slow as Marcus processed the situation. The assassin, because that's clearly what this was, would reach Zara in perhaps 10 seconds. They would strike once, probably aiming for the cluster of major arteries beneath her primary arms. Rigelians bled out quickly. Her 4 hearts would actually work against her, pumping her life away faster than any medical intervention could save her. Around him, 200 of the galaxy's brightest students continued taking notes on peaceful conflict resolution, completely oblivious to the real conflict about to unfold in their midst. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stood up. The movement was sharp and sudden, his chair scraping against the floor with a screech that cut through the professor's measured tones. Every head in the room turned toward him, including the assassins. For just a moment, pale eyes met his through the shadow of that hood, and Marcus saw something flicker there, confusion perhaps, or irritation at the unexpected interruption. "Professor," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "I have a question about the historical precedents you mentioned." Beltar looked surprised but pleased. The human student rarely participated in class discussions. "Of course, Marcus. Please elaborate." The assassin had frozen, still 3 rows away from Zara. The blade remained hidden, but Marcus could see the tension in those 2 long arms, the way the figure's weight had shifted to the balls of their feet. They were calculating, weighing whether to abort the mission or push through despite the unexpected attention. "You mentioned that the Treaty of Andromeda succeeded because both sides understood the true cost of violence," Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving the hooded figure. "But what happens when someone from outside the treaty framework doesn't share that understanding? When they come from a place where violence is still very real?" Several students shifted uncomfortably. It was well known that Earth was considered backwards by galactic standards, still dealing with crime, war, and other primitive social problems. "An interesting question," Felter replied. "The Federation's founding principle is that all species can evolve beyond their violent origins, given proper guidance and education. Even the most aggressive cultures have learned to—" The professor's words were cut off as the hooded figure suddenly moved, abandoning stealth for speed. The blade came up as they lunged toward Zara, who looked up from her notes with her 4 eyes wide in confusion. But Marcus was already moving too. The thing about growing up on Earth, on a Deathworld where humans had clawed their way to the top of the food chain through sheer stubborn refusal to die, was that certain reflexes became hardwired into the nervous system. When a human saw a predator stalking prey, when they witnessed violence about to unfold, millions of years of evolution kicked in with brutal efficiency. Marcus vaulted over his desk and the row in front of him, his body moving with the explosive speed that had once helped his ancestors outrun saber-toothed tigers and outwit dire wolves. He hit the assassin shoulder first just as the blade descended toward Zara's neck. The impact sent both of them tumbling into the next row of seats. The assassin was lighter than expected, their bones apparently hollow, or at least less dense than human bones, but they were also incredibly strong, twisting in Marcus's grip with serpentine flexibility as they tried to bring the blade around. The classroom erupted in chaos. Students scattered in all directions, their anti-gravity seats spinning wildly as they tried to get away from the violence. Some screamed, high, keening sounds that spoke of species unused to physical conflict. Others simply froze, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Professor Veltar was shouting something about security, his crystalline skin flashing in patterns that Marcus dimly remembered indicated extreme distress among Zephyrians. The assassin twisted again, managing to slash at Marcus's arm with the strange blade. It cut through his academy uniform like it was paper, drawing a line of fire across his forearm. But instead of backing away, Marcus pressed closer, using his superior mass to pin his opponent down. "Human!" the assassin hissed, their voice strangely accented. "You interfere with destiny itself." "Yeah, well," Marcus grunted, grabbing the assassin's wrist to keep the blade away from both himself and any nearby students. "That's kinda what we do." The skin was pale to the point of translucency, showing dark veins beneath. The eyes were solid black, no whites visible, and the mouth was too wide, filled with pointed teeth. Some kind of genetic modification, Marcus realized, or perhaps an entirely different species that had evolved to mimic human appearance. "You don't understand," the assassin continued, still struggling against Marcus's grip. "Her death is necessary. The war must begin. The strong must be separated from the weak." "See, that's where you're wrong," Marcus said, finally managing to twist the knife out of the assassin's grip. It clattered across the floor, its dark metal gleaming ominously. "Where I come from, we don't separate the strong from the weak. We make the weak stronger." Security forces finally burst through the classroom doors. Federation peacekeepers in their blue and silver uniforms, armed with non-lethal stunners and restraint fields. They quickly surrounded the struggling pair, their weapons trained on both Marcus and the assassin. "Stand down, both of you," the lead officer commanded, his translator rendering the words in accented Standard Galactic. "You are in violation of Federation peace codes." Marcus slowly raised his hands, keeping his weight on the assassin to prevent any last-minute escape attempts. "Officer, this person was attempting to murder Ambassador Kethmore's daughter. I was stopping them." The peacekeepers looked confused, their various alien faces showing uncertainty. Violence simply didn't happen in places like this. Their protocols were designed for dealing with civil disagreements and academic disputes, not assassination attempts. "Is this true?" the lead officer asked Professor Veltar, who was still flashing distress patterns. I don't know," the professor admitted. Everything happened so quickly. The human student stood up, asked a question, and then this. Zara Kethmore, who had been frozen in shock during the entire encounter, finally found her voice. "He saved my life," she said quietly, her four eyes fixed on the blade lying on the floor. "That creature was going to kill me." The assassin laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Kill one, save 1,000. The human has doomed entire worlds with his interference." Close quote. Well, Workus said, allowing the peacekeepers to help him to his feet while others restrained the assassin. "I'll worry about entire worlds later. Right now, I was just helping a friend." As the security team led the assassin away, Marcus became aware that every eye in the room was fixed on him. But this time, the stares weren't filled with curiosity or mild condescension. They were looks of shock, fear, and something else he couldn't quite identify. It would take him several more days to realize that what he was seeing was respect. The galaxy had just gotten its first real glimpse of what humans were capable of, and the sight had shaken them to their core. On every other world, in every other species, the instinct when faced with lethal violence was to flee, freeze, or call for help. But humans, as they just witnessed, had a fourth option. They fought back. The medical bay of the Galactic Diplomatic Academy was a marvel of intersectional biology, designed to treat injuries across hundreds of different species simultaneously. Healing pods hummed with energy fields calibrated for silicon-based life forms, while bioregeneration chambers worked their magic on beings who existed partially in other dimensions. At the center of it all sat Marcus Chen, getting 7 stitches in his forearm from a very confused Altairian medic. "I still don't understand how this happened," Dr. Vethal said through his species translation device, his tentacles weaving complex patterns in the air as he worked. The wound appears to be made by some form of primitive cutting implement, but our scanners detected no such weapons in the academy. It was the assassin's blade, Marcus replied patiently, watching the aliens work with professional interest. The stitching technique was remarkably similar to what human medics used, though the threads seemed to be some kind of biocompatible crystal fiber. But that's impossible, the doctor continued. Our security systems would have detected any weapon. Every person entering Academy grounds is scanned at the molecular level. Marcus was beginning to understand one of the fundamental problems with galactic civilization. They had become so accustomed to their technology solving every problem that they'd forgotten how to think like people who wanted to cause problems. Doctor, he said carefully, what if the weapon wasn't brought through security? What if it was made here, on Academy grounds? Vethel's tentacles stopped moving for a moment. Made? But from what and how? Before Marcus could answer, the medical bay doors slid open with a soft whisper. Commander Thaxlor of the Federation Security Forces entered, his massive Drakmari frame having to duck slightly to fit through the doorway. Behind him followed a smaller figure that Marcus recognized as Director Yelneth, the Academy's Zephyrian administrator. Mr. Chen, Commander Thaxlor rumbled, his voice carrying the undertones of barely suppressed aggression that even generations of genetic modification couldn't entirely eliminate from his warrior species. We need to talk. Dr. Vethal finished the last stitch and began applying a healing accelerator to the wound. Commander, my patient needs rest. This level of physical trauma is highly unusual for Academy students. This is not a normal Academy situation, Director Yelneth interjected, her crystalline skin flickering with patterns Marcus was learning to associate with extreme stress. Mr. Chen, the individual you apprehended, has requested to speak with you specifically. Marcus flexed his newly treated arm, testing the range of motion. Did they say why? No, Commander Thaxlor replied. But given that this person managed to bypass every security system we have, infiltrate the most secure educational facility in the sector, and carry what appears to be an undetectable weapon, we're inclined to accommodate their request, Marcus asked, surprised.